I like clean numbers. I like balances that match receipts and a mortgage statement that makes sense. My wife, Claire, calls it my little religion. She says it like a joke, but she also likes that I'm the steady one, the guy who doesn't panic. After my dad's small business failed and we spent a year juggling late notices, I promised myself I'd never let paperwork surprise me again. So when Claire's mother died and left Claire the family house in Ohio, I approached it like a project. The place was a 1920s two-story with sagging porch steps and wallpaper that looked like it had absorbed decades of cigarette smoke. Claire was sentimental. I was practical. We'd sell our current place, move in, and use the equity difference to finally get ahead. Pay down debt, pad retirement, maybe start a college fund for our daughter that didn't rely on hope. Claire said, "It's free housing, Mark. We're lucky." I nodded, calm, rational. It was just math. Except the probate papers weren't clean. There were liens mentioned in the margins, half-closed accounts, and one line about satisfaction pending. Claire waved it off. "Mom handled everything," she said, and kissed my cheek, like that settled it. I didn't understand what that meant until later. We moved in midsummer. The air inside smelled like old paste and dust. Our first week was boxes and contractors. The roof needed work. The furnace was ancient. I kept a running spreadsheet, materials, labor, permits, because that's how I keep anxiety in a box. The wallpaper in the dining room was the worst. Beige with faded roses, peeling at the seams. One Saturday morning, I stood on a chair with a scraper while Claire took our daughter to soccer. The radio was on low. I was in my element. Simple labor, measurable progress. When I pulled at a loose section near the corner, the paper tore in a long, satisfying strip. Behind it, the plaster was stained, and something white fluttered down like a dead leaf. I caught it before it hit the floor. It was a note, yellowed, folded twice, tucked behind the wallpaper like someone hid it in a hurry. My first thought was that it was an old receipt or a kid's drawing. My second thought, because my mind always goes there, was that it was something financial. The handwriting was tight and slanted. Started with a date from 1989. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. The money is not his. It never was. My mouth went dry. I read it again, slower. My hands went numb around the paper, like I'd grabbed something hot without realizing. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and read the note all the way through. It was signed E. There was no last name, just that initial and a phone number with an old area code. The note said that your father had been taking payments from a man named Harold, cash in envelopes, and that the house was part of the arrangement. It mentioned the accident and the papers I signed. It ended with, "Please don't let him do it again." I stared at the floral wallpaper still clinging to the wall like it had teeth. My heart was beating too slow, like it was waiting for instructions. Claire's family story was simple. Her dad, Ron, worked at the plant. Her mom, Ellen, stayed home. They were frugal. They made it work. Ron died when Claire was 22, heart attack, end of story. Claire kept his wedding ring in her jewelry box like a relic. The note suggested a different story, one that involved money changing hands and an accident, the kind of thing people don't bring up at Thanksgiving. I didn't call Claire immediately. I folded the note and put it in my wallet like it was evidence. That alone should tell you something about me. I didn't want comfort. I wanted control. When Claire got home, sunburned from the field, I said, "Hey, did your mom ever mention anything weird about the house? Like loans? Agreements?" Claire laughed. "Weird how?" I watched her face carefully. She looked genuinely confused. I said, "Never mind. Just contractor stuff. Denial feels like swallowing something sharp and pretending it went down smooth." That night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan clicked like a metronome. Claire's breathing was steady beside me. I stared at the dark and replayed the note in my head until the words lost meaning. In the morning, I dug through the probate folder again. I found the lien notices and called the county recorder's office. The woman on the phone sounded bored until I gave her the address. Then she got quiet and said, "Oh, that property." She told me there was an old civil judgment attached to the house that had been rolled forward for decades. It wasn't fully satisfied. It was linked to a wrongful death settlement from the late 80s. Wrongful death. My throat tightened. I thanked her and hung up, then sat at the kitchen table staring at the grain in the wood. I could hear Claire singing in the shower upstairs, off-key, cheerful. I wanted to believe this was some clerical mix-up. People share names. Records get messy. That's what I told myself while my stomach churned. I called our attorney, just the one who handled the estate paperwork. He asked for the judgment number, then said, slowly, "This is not trivial." "How much?" I asked because money is how my brain translates fear. "With interest," he said, "potentially over 200,000. I actually laughed, a short bark. $200,000 attached to free housing. I felt heat crawl up my neck, and my palms started sweating. Claire came down the stairs, hair damp, and asked, "What's wrong?" I said evenly, "We have a problem with the house." I didn't mention the note. Not yet. I still thought I could fix it quietly. Claire's face went pale when I told her the amount. She sat hard in the chair and said, "That can't be right. Mom would have told me." "Your mom is gone," I said, too blunt. Then softer, "Maybe she didn't know." Claire shook her head, fast. She knew everything. She balanced her checkbook down to the penny. She'd call the bank if a fee was off by $2. That image, her mom as meticulous, made my stomach drop. Because I'm meticulous too. Meticulous people don't miss a wrongful death judgment. I finally pulled the note from my wallet and slid it across the table. Claire read the first line and froze. Her eyes moved faster than her face could react. When she got to the part about your father, her lips parted slightly like she was trying to breathe through a straw. This is fake," she said, but her voice didn't have conviction. "It was behind the wallpaper," I said. "Someone put it there on purpose." Claire's hands started trembling. She pressed them flat on the table like she could pin them still. She whispered. That could be Aunt Elaine." I knew her Aunt Elaine as the one who always brought store-bought pie and drank too much wine. The one Claire said never quite recovered after her cousin died in the 80s in a car accident. "What accident?" I asked. Claire stared at the note like it might answer for her. "I don't know," she said, but her eyes didn't meet mine. Twist number 1 hit like a slow punch. Claire did know something. Not details, but the shape of it. And she'd lived with that shape so long it felt normal. We drove to Elaine's townhouse 2 days later. Claire gripped the steering wheel like she was afraid the car might drift into a ditch. I sat in the passenger seat, calm on the outside, counting breaths, calculating outcomes. Sell the house, negotiate the judgment, refinance, bankruptcy. Every option had a number. Elaine opened the door in a robe at noon, surprised to see us. When Claire showed her the note, Elaine's face changed in a way I can't unsee. It wasn't shock. It was recognition, like someone seeing an old wound reopened. "Oh, Ellen," she whispered. Then she looked at me sharp. "You found it." Claire said, "Is it true?" Elaine didn't answer right away. She went to the kitchen and poured coffee with shaking hands. The smell of stale grounds filled the room. Finally, she said, "Your father took money to keep his mouth shut." Claire made a small sound, like air leaving a balloon. "About what?" Elaine's eyes were wet but angry. "About the crash. About Harold's boy." She explained in fragments. Harold was a local businessman. His teenage son died in a drunk driving accident involving Ron, Claire's dad, and another man. There was a lawsuit. There were settlements. And there was, according to Elaine, an arrangement. Harold paid Ron under the table to keep certain details from coming out. To keep blame shifted. Claire whispered, "You're saying Dad killed someone and got paid for it?" Elaine flinched. "I'm saying your mother helped him survive it." Twist number 2 was realizing the money wasn't some bonus. It was hush money. It recolored every frugal Christmas, every paid-off car, every new appliance Ellen somehow afforded. On the drive home, Claire stared out the window and said, very quietly, "Mom made it sound like Dad died from stress." like work wore him down. I kept my eyes on the road. A wrongful death judgment doesn't just happen. There's paperwork. Your mom signed things. Claire's jaw tightened. She would have done anything to protect us. That line, the protective myth, was what she clung to. I could feel her trying to turn it into something noble. I wanted to let her. I wanted to believe it too, because the alternative was that we were living in a house built on someone else's loss. Our attorney called later with more details. The judgment wasn't against Ellen personally anymore. It was attached to the property. The plaintiff's estate had renewed it whenever they could. It was like a shadow following the deed. He said, "You can contest aspects, but it's unlikely you'll erase it. You may negotiate a settlement." "How much would they take?" I asked. "Depends how hard they want to punish the family," he said, and his tone had an edge. Punish the family, not just Ron, not just Ellen. That night, Claire said, "We could take a home equity loan to settle it." My mouth went dry again. "We don't have enough equity. Not with this lien." Claire pressed her fingers to her temples. "Then we use our savings." I thought about our retirement accounts, our daughter's small college fund, the emergency money I'd fought to build. I felt anger rise, then shame for feeling it. Because the moral answer is obvious. Pay what's owed. The human answer is uglier. Why is it us? I nodded anyway. We'll do what we have to. We met with the plaintiff's attorney in a plain office that smelled like toner and lemon cleaner. The man across from us was in his 40s, polite but cold. He slid a folder toward us. "This is the updated accounting," he said. "Interest, fees, renewal costs." The number on top made my stomach clench. $287,940. 12. Claire sucked in a breath like she'd been slapped. I kept my face neutral, but my hands were sweating under the table. "We want to resolve this," I said. "We didn't cause." He raised a hand. "Your family benefited. For decades, my client's family paid for a funeral and lost a son. The house exists because your in-laws protected an asset." He said it like a fact, not an accusation. And it landed like both. We offered a settlement using a mix of savings, a loan from my 401k, and, this part hurt, borrowing from Claire's small inheritance cash account. We would still be short, but we could propose a payment plan. The attorney listened, then said, "There's another issue." He opened the folder and slid out a copy of a document. An affidavit, signed by Ellen in 1992. In it, she stated she'd received compensation from Harold and agreed not to disclose certain information regarding the crash. Claire's face went blank. She stared at her mother's signature like it was someone else's handwriting. Her mouth moved as if forming words, but nothing came out. The attorney said, "That affidavit complicates settlement. It looks like conspiracy." Twist number 3 was the affidavit. Proof the secrecy was deliberate, notarized, planned. Not just grief and survival. Strategy. After that meeting, Claire wasn't just sad. She was defensive in a way that scared me. "She did it to keep us safe," she said over and over like a prayer. "If Dad went to prison, what would happen to us? We'd lose everything." I wanted to say, someone else lost everything anyway. But I didn't. I swallowed it because I could see her childhood in her eyes. How she'd built her identity around her mother being strong and her father being complicated but good. And I had my own motivations. I was already running numbers to see how to protect our assets. I researched bankruptcy exemptions in Ohio at midnight. I transferred small amounts into accounts that were harder to garnish, telling myself it was prudence, not evasion. That's the part that stains me. I wasn't just reacting. I was maneuvering. Then the letter came. The plaintiff's attorney had filed a motion to force sale if we couldn't settle. A legal path to push the property into liquidation. Claire found the letter before I did. She stood in the hallway holding it, and her hands shook so hard the paper rattled. "They can take the house," she whispered. I said, "Calm. We can still negotiate." She snapped, "You always say we can, like you can spreadsheet your way out of this." The anger in her voice wasn't just at me. It was at the crumbling story she'd lived inside. That night she went into the attic and came down with a metal box. Inside were old bank statements, envelopes, and what made my chest tighten, cash. Bundled, brittle, smelling like dust. Tens of thousands. Claire stared at it, stunned. Mom hid money. Twist number 4. Ellen hadn't just handled everything. She'd hoarded cash, likely from the hush payments, as if she'd always planned for this day. For about 24 hours, we had what felt like a solution. The false resolution. We counted the cash on the dining room table like criminals in a movie, except it wasn't glamorous. It was sweaty and sickening. My fingers were grimy from old bills. Claire kept wiping her palms on her jeans. There was $68,000. With that, plus our savings, plus a loan against my 401k, we could offer a lump sum settlement and maybe avoid forced sale. I felt a wave of relief so strong it made my eyes sting. Not joy, relief, the kind that loosens your shoulders after being clenched for weeks. Claire said, "Mom, she saved us." I didn't say what I was thinking. Mom saved her secret. We met with our attorney, who warned us about depositing large cash amounts, reporting requirements, scrutiny. But we needed it. We structured the offer, built the payment, prepared to sign. I even caught myself imagining a year from now, telling friends, "We had a crazy legal issue with the house, but we handled it." I pictured myself back in control. Then, 2 days before we planned to deliver the settlement, a sheriff's deputy came to the door with a summons. Not about the lien. It was about fraud. Someone had used my name to open a line of credit at a local credit union. $24,000. Maxed out. My signature on the application, sloppy but close enough. My mouth went bone dry. I felt my pulse in my fingertips. I asked Claire, carefully, "Did you open anything in my name?" She stared at the paper like it was written in another language. "No. Why would I?" But her eyes flicked, just once, toward the attic stairs. I went back up to the attic and dug deeper into the metal box and the surrounding clutter. Under old quilts and a cracked Christmas ornament tote, I found another envelope, newer, sealed with a credit union logo. Inside were statements, in my name, addressed to this house, paid in cash at the teller window for months, then suddenly stopped. Claire came up behind me and said, "I didn't know that was there." I held the statement up. My hands were shaking now, no hiding it. "Then who did?" She put a hand over her mouth. Her eyes were wet. "Mom," she whispered. She must have used your name because she thought it would be safer." "Safer for who?" I asked, and my voice came out raw. Claire sank onto a trunk. She couldn't borrow under her own name. The lien, her credit. She probably. I felt anger flare, then something worse. Shame that my first thought was, this will ruin my credit. My calm persona cracked, and under it was a selfish, terrified man. Our attorney confirmed what the deputy implied. The credit union was pursuing criminal charges unless the debt was paid or proven unauthorized. But Ellen was dead. Unauthorized would mean opening an investigation that could also expose the hush cash, the affidavit, everything. Claire said, "We can just pay it. Use the cash." I stared at her. "You want to use the hush money to pay off a fraud account your mother opened in my name?" She whispered, "What choice do we have?" That phrase again. Had to. Like necessity disinfects sin. I didn't call the police. I agreed to pay it because I didn't want my life ripped open in public. Guilt mixed with relief tastes like pennies. We paid the credit union. We made the settlement offer. For a brief moment, it looked like we might crawl out of it. Then the plaintiff's attorney requested proof of funds. Our attorney advised transparency. We disclosed the cash, describing it as personal savings kept by the decedent. The response came back fast. The plaintiff's side filed to compel discovery of Ellen's finances, alleging hidden assets tied to the original wrongdoing. In plain terms, they wanted to dig and they had legal reason. Claire crumpled when she read it. She sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, knees pulled to her chest, and said, "They're going to turn Mom into a monster." I wanted to comfort her. I also wanted to shake her. My own anger was shifting. Less at the plaintiff, more at Ellen. and at Claire for defending her so fiercely. I called Elaine again, demanding to know if there was more. Elaine sighed and said, "There's always more." She told me Harold didn't just pay Ron. He paid Ellen after Ron died. Monthly. For her silence, Elaine said. And because she knew where the paperwork was. Paperwork? I asked. Elaine hesitated. Something about insurance. A second policy. My stomach dropped. A second policy means a second payout. I went back to the attic and found a thin folder tucked behind a rafter. Inside was a life insurance policy on Ron, taken out months before his heart attack. Beneficiary, Ellen. Payout, $250,000. And a note in Ellen's handwriting, "Keep paying, or I talk." I sat there in the dust, throat tight, realizing Ron's death might not have been just stress. It might have been timed, or at least monetized. The house wasn't an inheritance. It was a leverage point in a decades-long financial blackmail loop. When I showed Claire the policy, she looked like she'd been punched in the stomach. She kept saying, "No," softly over and over, as if the word could undo ink. I watched her process it in slow motion, denial cracking into awareness. Her mother's careful frugality now looked like planning. Her father's heart attack now had a $sign attached. Claire said, "You think she did something to him?" "I don't know," I said, and it was the truth. But suspicion is a kind of poison. Once it's in you, it spreads. Our marriage became transactional overnight. We spoke in numbers and legal terms. Claire wanted to keep fighting to save the house. I wanted to cut losses, sell, declare bankruptcy if needed, and get out from under her family's shadow. She accused me of abandoning her. I accused her of living inside a lie. We didn't scream. We said things quietly, which somehow made them sharper. "You're acting like my family is contagious," she said. "It is," I replied, and I hated myself for how easy it was. In a moment I'm not proud of, I moved money, our remaining savings, into an account only I controlled. I told myself it was to protect our daughter. Claire found out, of course. She stood in the doorway of my office and said, "So that's who you are." I didn't answer, because yes, under pressure, my control turns into betrayal too. The final collapse wasn't dramatic. It was paperwork and consequences, one envelope at a time. The plaintiff's side refused our settlement unless we agreed to full disclosure and a higher amount. Our attorney said they had leverage. We couldn't refinance. We couldn't sell cleanly. The court scheduled a hearing for forced sale. Claire started talking about taking a personal loan from a coworker, about borrowing against our daughter's education account, about anything to keep the house. It wasn't just the house. It was her last physical link to the mother she'd idolized, even as that image rotted. I said, "This house is poison." She said, "It's my mother." We ended up in mediation. The plaintiff's attorney brought photographs of the dead boy, printed on glossy paper. He didn't slam them down. He just set them on the table as if they belonged there. Claire's face went gray. My mouth tasted like bile. We agreed to a forced sale with the proceeds going first to the judgment. Anything left, if anything, would be ours. There wasn't much left after fees. The credit union fraud was resolved because we paid, but my credit report will carry a scar for years. The hush cash is gone, swallowed by debt and legal costs. Our retirement took a hit that will follow us into old age, if we're lucky enough to get there. Claire moved into an apartment near her job. I stayed with our daughter in a rented duplex across town. We share custody like a schedule. We speak politely, as if politeness can substitute for trust. The house sold in late fall. The new owners ripped out the wallpaper, gutted the kitchen, posted cheerful renovation photos online. I saw one by accident. Bright paint, clean lines, none of the old smell. In one picture, the dining room wall was bare plaster, like the note had never existed. I kept the note anyway. It sits in a folder with court documents and payment plans. Sometimes I take it out and read it, not because it helps, but because I can't stop trying to find the moment where I could have chosen differently. Claire and I are still legally married. Divorce costs money we don't have, and there's a strange comfort in the unfinished. We'll probably finalize it when one of us can afford to be done. I'm calmer now. I update my spreadsheets. I send payments. I smile at my daughter at breakfast and talk about homework like our world isn't held together by thin threads. But I keep thinking about wallpaper, how it hides things in plain sight. How a person can live in a room for decades and never know what's behind the surface until they start peeling. The part that lingers isn't the lawsuit or the money, or even the idea that Claire's parents might have built a life on blackmail. It's that Ellen, meticulous Ellen, took the time to tuck that note behind the paper where someone would eventually find it. A warning, a confession, maybe a weapon. Sometimes, late at night, I run my thumb over the crease where it was folded, and I wonder how many other walls in my life have something pressed behind them, waiting for the first good tug.